They told me with a calm that felt rehearsed that blood was supposed to bind us, that loyalty was a language we already spoke. But that night at my parents' kitchen table with a chipped ceramic mug still steaming in front of me, their words were a foreign tongue. My name is Ariana Blake, 31, and I moved back to Asheboro to keep my family from falling apart, or so I thought. I was supposed to be the dutiful daughter, the quiet fixer. Instead, I learned the hard way that doing the right thing often leaves you naked in the cold. The hook is small, a single sentence that should have stopped everything. My mother set down a manila envelope and said, "We've decided, Ariana." That pause, long enough to rearrange every plan I'd made for myself, was the moment I felt the world tilt. They had decided the family farm and their savings would go to my brother, not me. "He needs it for his business," my father said, as if that explained away the years I'd spent patching their finances, as if my steady paycheck and late nights balancing their accounts had been invisible. For years, I had been their safety net. I turned down a promotion in Charlotte. I postponed my wedding twice, and I rearranged my life so Mom could have chemotherapy rounds covered without worry, and so Dad could keep the old truck on the road. When the roof leaking threatened the farmhouse pantry, I scraped my savings to hire a roofer. I was always the invisible ledger in the background, quiet, dependable, wearing the mask of familial obligation. People like us are easy to take for granted. The open loop. How did loyalty turn into erasure? I kept that question like a stone in my pocket, heavy and warm, grinding against my resolve. The room smelled like gravy and coffee. The light from the pendant lamp painted my father's knuckles a familiar yellow. My brother Jared sat with his legs splayed, a phone buzzed on the table. He smiled like a man who expects applause. "I've got investors lined up," he said. "This is my chance to build a business that matters." Mom squeezed his hand like she was passing the baton. I watched their faces and realized I had become the background character in my own family's drama. My silence that night wasn't shame. It was calculation. I left the table with my napkin folded, palms trembling, and walked out into the humid North Carolina night, the cicadas wailing like a chorus of accusatory witnesses. A car passed headlights slicing the dark. For the first time in a long time, I thought of myself in the future, not as a rescuer, but as someone who might finally be rescued by herself. 2 weeks later, I met my friend Denise at the coffee shop on Main Street. Denise has a knack for bluntness and a memory like an old detective. "They told you," she asked without preamble, and I told her the whole scene, everything that didn't fit inside the manila envelope. She frowned, then passed me her phone with a screenshot. Jared had used the farmhouse as collateral for a loan. Collateral, the word tasted like betrayal. He'd taken out a line of credit and used their home as the guarantee without telling Mom and Dad. Or maybe he'd told them and they'd nodded because they were still in love with the idea of him, not the reality. Why would he do that? I asked, though I already knew greed and entitlement can look a lot like ambition. "Because he believes favors are forever," Denise said. "Because someone told him he'd be king if he asked loud enough." The mini hook here is a small detail that matters later. Jared's signature on the loan looked neat, practiced. He'd signed with the same flourish he used when autographing a joke for a high school girlfriend, a flourish of entitlement. I drove straight to the bank, my heart punching at my ribs. The bank teller's smile was polite but hollow. "We can't discuss account details without permission," she said. Legalese is a neutral, cold language. It wrapped around my plea like a second skin. The bank clerk did share, though, that a notice had been filed, deadline 30 days. My stomach dropped like an anchor. 30 days to save a home. The numbers in my head turned to words. 30 days, one mortgage, the threat of foreclosure. No one would call it dramatic in the moment. They'd call it paperwork. But paperwork can erase a life. When I told my parents, Mom's eyes darted away, and Dad's jaw clenched like he'd swallowed nails. We trusted him. Dad said the kind of sentence that closes off conversation. "He's our son." I wanted to show them the receipts, the months I'd covered the groceries, the nights I had driven 3 hours to pick up their prescriptions. but it felt like throwing torches into a wind that only blew away from me. They were choosing nostalgia over evidence. They were choosing a dream, the idea of Jared as a brilliant entrepreneur. I was a ledger to be balanced out. Weeks passed in a blur of no calls. Jared posted pictures of a team meeting in Charlotte cufflinks, glinting hashtags like building and grind. He posted stories of motivational mornings. Strangers liked and gave him currency I had never been offered. Meanwhile, the bank notices grew more urgent. My parents believed his narrative, and in their belief my sacrifices were rendered obsolete. Their silence was a verdict. On a rainy Tuesday, I came home to find the mailbox stuffed with third-party notices. The house that had smelled of my grandmother's lemon cookies was at stake. The cliffhanger, I stood on the porch holding the envelope, hands cold, and realized there was one path they hadn't considered, one small, dangerous idea that my anger would turn into action. I slid the bank notice into my purse and crossed the yard, not to beg, but to plan. What I did next would not be loud. It would be precise. It's strange how betrayal rearranges your priorities. Before that night, I'd never considered the language of leverage. I had always thought love and obligation were indistinguishable. But when the bank's deadline shadowed my parents' doorstep, I started to see the ledger not only as numbers, but as a map. You can draw a line through a life as easily as you strike through a debt. The question became, who had been drawing lines all these years and who was erasing whom? I started small and quiet. I read everything I could about loan agreements and signatures, and the ways people use property as a promise they don't intend to keep. Legal documents, it turns out, are less about truth and more about form. The bank had Jared's name and a document. That was enough to scare a family into silence. But documents can be challenged if you know where the seams are. At my office, I began to spend my lunch hours on legal forums and title search websites, the glow of my laptop making me look like a woman plotting a small revolution. At night, I did something else entirely. I dug through old receipts. Not by my parents' permission, because permission had been the currency they spent on Jared, but because I needed proof of history. Proof that I had been the steady hand, that the years of sacrifice could be mapped into numbers written out as words. Mortgage payments covered prescriptions, paid emergency repairs, funded. I wrote everything down in a spiral notebook I once used for vacation plans. The numbers looked different when spelled out: $1,000 here, $300, there $500 for a winter repair. The spiral notebook became a ledger of truth. Denise came over one night and found the stack of receipts spread like an accusation across my kitchen table. "You're going to make them see," she said. Her eyes were hard, the way they get when she's decided to stop being polite. "Not with yelling, with evidence." Her suggestion was the first gear shift in my plan. Evidence is an ugly word for something that can heal you. It sounds legal and cold, but it is also a kind of redemption. The first tactical move was small and public. I spoke at the Rotary Club where my mother's sister, Aunt June, still volunteered. I framed my words carefully, spoke about the importance of planning for retirement, the dangers of collateralized loans, the love of family. People nodded. It was a performance, but the best kind one that planted seeds. Someone at the meeting mentioned a local attorney who specialized in elder financial abuse. I scribbled the name in the margin of my spiral notebook. Minnie Hook, an old neighbor from down the road, sent me a text with a pictured Jared. Stepping out of a rented SUV, stacks of branded boxes behind him, a logo of a company that didn't exist. The image was small, but it confirmed the rumors shaping my town's undercurrent. Jared had been selling a story to investors and buying the lifestyle of success on credit. He had been using other people's trust as currency. The neighbor's message read like a challenge. "Are you going to let him?" I hired the attorney. Her office smelled like old books and sharp coffee. She had a way of listening to details and putting them onto paper like stitches. "There's a chance," she said, "but you'll need to show pattern-falsified documents, undue influence, misrepresentation, and you'll need witnesses." My chest tightened. Witnesses meant my parents' friends, neighbors, anyone who had seen Jared act reckless while our family paid for the consequences. It meant dragging intimate details into daylight. It felt wrong and right at the same time. We filed a preliminary challenge to the loan on the grounds that Jared had misrepresented his assets and that my parents had signed under emotional pressure. The attorney used phrases like undue influence and lack of capacity because my mother had been ill. The filings were a legal blade, slow and precise. There were risks, public humiliation, town gossip, and the certainty that once you opened that door, everything behind it would tumble out. But the alternative was watching the farmhouse become an Instagram backdrop for Jared's rise. My parents reacted predictably. Dad called the lawyer a liar, a meddler who would tear the family apart. Mom cried, saying she had wanted to believe in Jared. They accused me of stabbing the family in the back. Their accusations hit a raw place, but there was also an unexpected current of relief in their defensiveness. Guilt is heavy, and sometimes relief hides inside denial. At work, the tide changed. Colleagues who had avoided me started to ask questions when the local paper ran a brief piece titled, "Woman Fights to Save Family Home." A few clients gave their support. A local pastor offered to mediate. The town, which had begun with whispers, shifted its eyes. Sympathy is fickle, but it returned enough to be useful. There was a bittersweet thing about being believed after months of being dismissed. Validation doesn't erase pain, but it makes persistence possible. Jared, however, doubled down. He posted a video with glossy production, a montage of meetings, a voiceover about vision, and a shot of him signing papers. He called me a liar without naming me, smeared the situation the way someone smears a smear. I sat on my couch and watched his face on my screen, calm and practiced, and realized the fight wasn't only legal, it was narrative. He had the louder platform in that moment, and people are quick to trust a polished story. The cliffhanger arrived at 2 a.m. when I received an anonymous envelope slid under my apartment door. Inside were 2 photographs and a receipt. The photographs showed Jared at a restaurant in Atlanta with a man whose face I didn't recognize, a man wearing a pin that matched the investor logo from months ago. The receipt was for a deposit at a storage facility in Charlotte. Someone somewhere had been cleaning out the backstage. The evidence fit like a key into the lock I hadn't realized existed. I slept half an hour and then wrote down a list of names I needed to call. The next move would be the one that changed everything, but I had to be careful. Precision beats passion. The ledger in my spiral notebook had become an instrument of strategy. Secrets in small towns have corrosive patterns. They eat at reputations the way damp eats at paint. Before I ever spoke with an investigator, I learned the rhythm of rumor: build it, steady it, and wait. My attorney arranged for a private investigator to pull title records and run background checks. I watched from the edge of the meeting room as woman after woman, neighbors, a former teacher, a pastor, told the investigator small stories that, when strung together, painted a different portrait of Jared. He wasn't just flashy, he was unreliable, a serial dreamer who used borrowed credit to stage success. The pattern was there like a bruise under skin. The investigator's report was both a relief and an escalation. It revealed that Jared had used multiple shell entities, rented office space with a temporary sign, and taken money from people who later received nothing. There were whispers of investor checks, bounced promises unkept. Reading the report, I felt something shift inside me. For years, I had internalized guilt as a default emotion. Now I found a tougher, clearer feeling: righteous anger. I compiled everything: the receipts, the storage rental receipt, the restaurant photographs, the investigator's annotations. Denise helped me organize the files into a binder, labeled in my handwriting evidence. It felt strange to name the binder so plainly, like confronting a monster with a flashlight. We met with the attorney, and she crafted a sting to prove undue influence. We needed someone who could say that my parents were pressured, that Jared moved fast and charmingly while they were vulnerable. That person existed: Aunt June's neighbor, Mrs. Whitaker, who had watched Jared cajole Mom into signing for just a minute, while she confusedly nodded. When Mrs. Whitaker agreed to testify, my chest both tightened and lifted. It is one thing to read a narrative and another to hear it verified by someone who had no stake in the fight. She spoke plainly about Jared's impatience, his habit of fixing things for his parents only when a camera was nearby. Her words had the grainy honesty of someone who has nothing to gain and everything to say. The legal filings were amended. The bank notices became part of a court docket. The fight had a shape now. But this was not only about law. It was about the town, about narrative and reputation. Jared's social media army mobilized, and so did others. I received messages hinting at the costs of being a whistleblower. Lose friends, lose clients, lose your mother's trust. The risk was real. My father sent a terse voicemail, a sentence cut from the life we'd known. You are making choices we don't understand. It was meant to wound, and it did. The turning point came when a key investor someone listed in one of Jared's glossy videos called my attorney. He wanted to meet. He claimed he had been misled too. He had given Jared seed money and then realized the structure was a house of mirrors. He was angry and afraid of reputation damage. His support tilted a scale I hadn't known existed. Big reputations worry about the small-town whispers, because small-town whispers can spread to newspapers and podcasts. When the investor said he would cooperate, he handed me leverage beyond my own family. Minnie Hook, the investor, admitted to having receipts of his own bank transfers, signed letters, a recorded conversation where Jared promised returns that never existed. That recording would later be pivotal. The law loves records. The town loves certainty. The recording was a cold, steady thing that cut through anecdote with mechanical precision. Court dates were scheduled. The hearings felt like theater and like surgery. I sat in the front row for each session, posture, rigid binder clutched. Jared would look at me sometimes, his expression shifting from arrogance to something like fear. People whispered in the hallway. My mother attended one hearing and left after 10 minutes, overwhelmed by the scrutiny. It hurt, but it also clarified where she stood. She had not yet chosen to be on my side. Then came the day the judge ordered an interim freeze on the property because of the weight of the evidence. For the first time, the farmhouse could not be sold or used as collateral while the case proceeded. The judge's gavel sounded like a punctuation on a long-running sentence. Relief was a strange, brittle thing. I cried, but the tears tasted like glass sharp necessary. The victory was public in all the worst and best ways. Jared's curate image cracked in the press. He scrambled. His posts became defensive. He sent my parents pleading letters. They read them and cried. The town watched like it watches storms, fascinated, a little guilty. For every neighbor who offered me a bowl of soup, there were old friends who avoided me. The social ledger balanced differently, some debts paid in kindness, others in cold shoulders. The cliffhanger at the end of this chapter is not legal. The court can freeze documents and subpoena records, but it cannot mend a relationship. One evening, after the judge's order, I returned home to a message that made my stomach drop, a photograph of the farmhouse's front porch, taken from across the road, with a note anonymous saying, Jared had been seen with a moving truck and a woman whose face I couldn't quite make out. The implication was clear: someone might be preparing to move things out to scramble assets in the dark. I checked my phone again and found another message, a file attachment labeled with a date. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a scanned voicemail my mother had left for Jared weeks before, in which she said in a small, unsteady voice, I just want us to be together. Her pleading was a fragile weapon both for me and against me. If the bank case saved the house but ruined them, would it have been worth it? The answer wasn't obvious, and that uncertainty was the most dangerous thing of all. I did not sleep the night the anonymous message arrived. I sat on my couch with the porch photograph still open on my phone, the soft glow turning my living room into a dim, watchful cave. Outside, Asheboro's night hummed the way it always did, quiet, steady, indifferent. But inside me, something was shifting, a hinge clicking into place. By dawn, I drove to the farmhouse. Mist clung low to the fields, and for a moment nostalgia threatened me. Every memory of my childhood was tied to the porch shelling peas, with grandma birthday photos taped to the railings, late summer nights, when lightning bugs blinked like Morse code. I stepped out of my car, heart thrumming, listening for movement. The house was still, but there were tire marks gouged into the dirt driveway, fresh enough that the tracks still held the shape of the treads. Someone had been there, maybe hours earlier, maybe with a moving truck. I took pictures. Not because the marks alone were evidence, but because the fear behind them was a truth the court might one day need. My hands shook as I ducked around the side of the house. A single basement window had been shoved open. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and metal, like someone had been handling old boxes. The open loop now was not whether Jared would try to hide assets, but how far he would go before the law caught him. Before leaving, I slipped a note under the old screen door. House is under a court-ordered freeze. Moving anything is a violation. I knew it wouldn't stop him. It wasn't meant to stop him. It was meant to make him slip. I drove straight to my attorney's office. She scanned the photos, her fingers tapping the desk in a slow, deliberate pattern. "This isn't enough to accuse him of tampering," she said, "but it's enough to request an emergency inspection of the property." "Do it," I said. She gave a thin smile. "Ariana, once we file this, it becomes war." I met her eyes. My voice was steady. He declared war the second he used their home as collateral, and so she filed it. That afternoon, Deputy Marshal Evans contacted me to schedule the inspection. He was a tall man with a voice that sounded like gravel rolled into honey, gentle but edged with authority. He agreed to meet me and the attorney at the farmhouse 2 days later. 2 days, 48 hours felt like a lifetime. In that time, the town began to pick sides more openly. A neighbor whispered that he'd seen Jared arguing with a woman in a rental car. Someone else said he was trying to sell equipment from the barn. A third had heard shouting through the walls of my parents' living room. Asheboro was a small town. Secrets here were like pollen carried everywhere with the wind. My mother called me the night before the inspection. Her voice was thin, frayed. "Ariana, let him fix this," she whispered. "Please, don't drag your brother through the courts. You're breaking him." I swallowed hard. "Mom, he broke himself, and he's breaking you." "You don't understand," she said, voice cracking. "He just wants everything." I finished softly. "He wants everything, and you're letting him." She didn't answer. When she finally hung up, the silence tasted like surrender, not mine but hers. The cliffhanger came at dawn the next day, a message from Denise with only 5 words. "Your brother is running scared." The emergency inspection drew half the town's curiosity. Deputy Marshal Evans, my attorney, and I drove up the gravel road just after 9 in the morning, the sun still low and casting long shadows. As we approached, we saw movement, someone stepping off the porch and into a truck. Jared. His shoulders stiffened when he saw us. His jaw grinding so tight, I could see the tension pulsing in his neck. He slammed his truck door and strode toward us like a man preparing for battle. "You're unbelievable," he spat, jabbing a finger at me. "Dragging cops here. Over what dirt in the driveway?" "A window draft," Evans held up. "Mr. Blake, this is a lawful inspection. Stand aside." Jared let out a bitter laugh. "Lawful? You people don't know this family." Then he turned to stare to me, eyes burning. "You think you're saving them. You're not. You're ripping everything apart." I swallowed, the rush of anger rising in my throat. "No, Jared. I'm just finally refusing to let you do it." Evans and my attorney began the walkthrough, taking notes, photographing rooms, documenting items that seemed moved or recently disturbed. In the basement, several boxes were stacked near the door, too conveniently placed, too recently handled. Evans photographed them, then asked who packed them. "I did," Jared snapped. "I was organizing the place." "Organizing," my attorney repeated, her tone unreadable. Evans knelt beside one box and lifted the flap. It was filled with old documents, family tax returns, medical bills. My mother had once cried over handwritten letters from my grandmother. But beneath those were newer documents, receipts for equipment sales, bank statements, and what appeared to be drafts of contracts Jared had never disclosed. The mini hook emerged when Evans pulled out a torn envelope addressed to my father with a return stamp from a woman in Wilmington. I recognized the handwriting. It wasn't my mother's. My father's secrets now brushed the edges of this case, expanding it into something far deeper than financial fraud. For a moment, my knees weakened. But Evans kept going. He found a second box in the barn. This one held branded merchandise, hats, shirts, and mugs plastered with Jared's non-existent company logo. All of it unused, empty props for an image. Then something caught Evans's eye behind the old tractor, fresh footprints beside a locked storage chest. A chain had been cut recently. Inside the chest, dozens of polished brochures for a grand opening event that had never occurred, along with letters from supposed investors. All unsigned. For the first time, I saw fear flicker through Jared's expression. Evans straightened. Mr. Blake, I'm marking these items for seizure pending further review. Jared's face flushed deep red. You can't do that. I can, Evans said calmly. And I will. My brother's composure finally splintered. Ariana, call this off. Right now, before this gets worse. It's already worse, I said quietly. You just don't want the world to see it. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a sharp whisper only I could hear. You think you've won? You have no idea what I'm capable of. But threats are loud when someone is losing power. The inspection ended with Evans cataloging every suspicious item and securing copies of documents. My attorney's eyes gleamed not with gloating but with precision. We've got enough to request a full audit, she said once we were outside. My breath caught. A criminal audit. Yes, my world stilled. A criminal audit meant the possibility of fraud charges, jail time, public hearings, court transcripts that would drag our family history into the open. I wasn't sure whether to feel triumphant or terrified. As I stood in the gravel drive processing the shift, my phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. Check your parents' house tonight. It was the last line that chilled me. He's not finished. I parked a block away from my parents' house just after dusk. The street lamps flickered with that particular hum that always reminded me of childhood evenings riding bikes until the mosquitoes got bold, listening to Dad whistle as he watered the tomatoes. Back then, everything felt simple, because I didn't know how much adults could hide behind quiet routines. Now my family felt like a house built of secrets and soaked wood one spark away from burning down. I approached slowly, keeping to the shadows. A single light glowed in the living room. I could hear voices, my mother's soft, anxious murmur and my father's deeper rumble. I crept closer, heart pounding, until their words sharpened through the screen window. She shouldn't have filed anything, my mother whispered. She's turning the whole town against us. My father sighed heavily. She thinks she's protecting us. She's ruining him, Mom said. And if she keeps going, everyone will know. Her voice cut off abruptly. Then she said the sentence that froze me to the porch. She'll find out about Wilmington. Wilmington. The letter Evans found. My father groaned. I told you that was years ago. A mistake. A mistake that could destroy us, my mother said, voice trembling. My stomach twisted. My father had always been the steady one, the man who stood at church doorways shaking hands and helping neighbors fix fences. Now there was another woman's name buried in our family story, and Mom had known. The betrayal wasn't just Jared's anymore. It ran deeper. The mini hook sparked when I heard a third voice inside the house. Jared. He was sitting in the shadows near the hallway, his voice low and venomous. She won't just ruin me, he said. She'll ruin you both. You think Ariana will keep quiet about Dad's little history? About the hospital debt she covered? About you nearly losing the house years ago? My mother gasped. How do you know? I read her files, Jared said. All the receipts she kept, all the evidence she's using. I felt my pulse go rigid. He'd been inside my apartment. My father's tone sharpened. You went too far, son. No, Jared said calmly. She went too far. And I'm going to put an end to it. The room fell silent. What do you mean, Mom whispered. Jared stood. I heard his footsteps move toward the front door. He muttered one sentence before stepping onto the porch. I know exactly how to shut her up. I backed away, heart hammering hard enough to bruise my ribs. I ducked behind the shrubs as Jared pushed the door open, scanning the yard with that restless predator's gaze. He walked down the steps, pulled out his phone, and made a call. Yeah, he said. Tonight. I'll meet you behind the storage units. The infamous storage units, where the investigator's receipt had come from. He paused. Yes, everything's ready. She won't stop me. When he drove away, tires crunching like bones under wheels, I stood frozen in the dark. My mother's silhouette lingered behind the screen door, shoulders slumped, face pressed into her hands. I realized then that saving them might not matter anymore. What mattered was surviving whatever Jared was planning. The cliffhanger rose like a held breath. I texted Denise one sentence. He's making a move tonight, and I'm following him. I followed Jared from a distance far enough that he wouldn't notice headlights trailing him close enough that I could keep his taillights in sight. Asheboro's outskirts at night were a patchwork of dark fields and isolated gas stations, the kind of quiet that made every sound feel amplified. My breath fogged inside the car as he turned toward the old storage units, cold metal rows that had once seemed harmless when I was a child riding my bike past them. Now they felt like a stage waiting for something terrible to happen. He pulled into the farthest row where the overhead lights were dim and flickering. I parked behind an abandoned RV 2 lots over. My pulse thudded in my ears as I cracked the driver's door and stepped out slowly, quietly, gravel shifting under my shoes like a warning. A second vehicle waited near him, a dark SUV with tinted windows. A man stepped out, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a cap pulled low. He didn't look like an investor. He looked like someone familiar with threats. Jared shook his hand. "You got the files?" the man asked, his voice a low rumble. "Yeah," Jared said. "Everything I pulled from her place in my parents' house. Once we're done, she won't be able to touch me. Or the business. The business that never existed." I moved closer each step, a negotiation between courage and fear. My fingers hovered near my phone, ready to record. The man opened the SUV trunk. Inside were piles of sealed envelopes, electronics, and a crowbar. He lifted out a metal gas can. My heart stumbled. "Burn it," the man said. "All of it. No evidence, no case." Jared hesitated. "We can't do it here. Someone might see." The man laughed. "This dump, no one comes out here unless they're hiding something." My mind raced. If they burned documents mine, my parents, the forged contracts, my case would unravel. Everything I'd built would collapse like wet paper. I leaned forward to get a better angle with my phone, and that's when my foot snapped a twig. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Jared spun. "Who's there?" I ducked behind the RV, breath quickening. The stranger stepped toward where I'd been standing, the crowbar glinting under the dim light. "Someone's watching," he growled. "Deal with it." Jared's tone broke into panic. I don't know who." The man grabbed Jared by the collar. "You said no loose ends." Jared swallowed hard. "Just help me burn this and we go." No one saw anything. But I had seen, and now they knew someone was here. My phone buzzed suddenly. Denise. I cursed silently and killed the sound, but Jared had already snapped his head toward the noise. There he shouted, charging toward the RV. I ran. I sprinted through the rows of storage garages, gravel scattering behind me. I could hear Jared's footsteps, heavy and frantic, stalking me like prey. The night felt too small, the air too thin. "You can't outrun this, Ariana," he screamed. "You're ruining everything." My lungs burned as I veered behind a row of units and pressed against the cold metal wall. He ran past me, not seeing where I'd turned. I grabbed my phone, hit record, and aimed it toward the SUV. The stranger dumped the files into a metal bin. He unscrewed the gas can, the smell thick and unmistakable. He struck a match. The flame flared orange and deadly. I recorded every second. My hands trembling, I whispered to the camera, "This is evidence tampering. This is destruction of documents under a court freeze." A second later, Jared spotted me. There he yelled. I bolted back towards my car as both men chased after me. My pulse thrashed like a trapped bird. I scrambled into the driver's seat, turned the key, and floored it. Gravel blasted out behind me as their silhouettes grew smaller in the rearview mirror. Jared shouted something I couldn't hear, but his face said enough. He wasn't just desperate now. He was scared and dangerous. The cliffhanger flickered as I sped toward town. I had the recording. But I also knew Jared wouldn't let me keep it without a fight. I didn't go home. Going home would have been predictable, and predictable meant vulnerable. Instead, I drove straight to Denise's apartment, my hands shaking so violently I nearly dropped my keys twice before she finally opened the door. She pulled me inside immediately. "You look like you outran a wolf." "2 wolves," I corrected, breathless. "And one of them is my brother." I told her everything, the meeting at the storage units, the stranger with the gas can, the files burning, the chase through the garages. Her expression darkened with every detail until she said, "This is criminal. You need to take this video to the attorney first thing in the morning." "I'm scared he'll come after me again tonight," I admitted. Denise placed her hands on my shoulders. "Then you're staying here." She double-checked the locks, pulled down the blinds, and set 2 mugs of chamomile tea on the table, though neither of us touched them. My phone buzzed repeatedly, calls from my mother, then my father, then unknown numbers. I didn't answer. Not until my mother left a voicemail that made my entire body go cold. "Ariana, please come home. Your father is sick. Jared said terrible things. He said you're trying to destroy us. Please talk to us before this goes any further." Her voice sounded worn out, fragile, almost terrified. I replayed the message 3 times before realizing what felt off. She never mentioned the house. She never mentioned the legal case. She only mentioned Jared. Denise leaned forward. "This is a setup. He's manipulating them to lure you back." I knew she was right. The message wasn't really from my mother, it was from her fear. The kind Jared fed like a parasite. Still something gnawed at me. My father had heart issues years ago. Was he actually okay? Or was this just another tactic? Denise shook her head. You go there tonight, you won't come back with your phone or your case. But guilt is a powerful tug. And family guilt, it's practically gravitational. I called my attorney instead. She answered on the second ring. Ariana. It's late. What happened? I have a video, I said. Of Jared, burning evidence, with someone else involved. She exhaled sharply. Send it to me now. My fingers trembled as I uploaded the file. When she watched it, her voice sharpened into a tone I hadn't heard before, part urgency, part triumph. This is enough to request an emergency writ for full seizure of Jared's documents, she said, and enough to have the sheriff's office question him. Relief washed through me. But then she said something else. Ariana, don't go anywhere near your parents' house tonight. If Jared feels cornered, he might lash out. I thanked her and hung up, but sleep refused to come. Every sound outside Denise's apartment made me flinch. At 3 a.m, a car door slammed down the street. At 4, someone walked past the window. At 5, a dog barked endlessly, as if warning of something only it could sense. Just after sunrise, my attorney texted, "Judge approved the seizure. Sheriff's team headed to your parents' place." My breath caught. Then moments later, another message. "Jared is there. Something's happening." The cliffhanger rose like a tide as Denise grabbed her keys. "Ariana, we need to go." We reached my parents' house just as 2 sheriff's vehicles pulled into the driveway. Deputy Marshal Evans stepped out, nodding grimly when he saw me. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. Inside the house, shouting erupted. Jared's voice sharp, frantic. My mother sobbing. My father wheezing something unintelligible. Evans motioned for his deputies, then pushed the door open. My parents stood in the living room, pale and shaken. Jared was pacing, hair disheveled, holding a crumpled stack of papers I recognized immediately. My spiral notebook. He had broken into my apartment. The sheriff's team fanned into the room. Evans raised a hand. Mr. Blake put the notebook down. Jared backed away, gripping it tighter. "She's destroying us. You don't understand. She wants everything. She's trying to take the farm. Ruin my business. Ruin me." His voice cracked, desperation dripping through. Evans stepped closer. "Mr. Blake, now." My father inhaled sharply, clutching his chest. My mother grabbed his arm. "Harold, Harold, breathe." I rushed forward before Evans could stop me. "Dad, can you hear me?" My father looked at me, not with anger this time, but with fear. "Ariana, what have we done?" His knees buckled. My mother screamed. Evans called for paramedics immediately. Deputies surrounded Jared while EMTs lifted my father onto the stretcher. He stared up at me with watery eyes, his voice a broken thread. I should have listened. Then he was carried out the door. My mother followed, crying so hard her shoulders shook. And Jared? He finally stopped pacing. The fight drained from him. He looked at the notebook in his hands, then at me. "This wasn't supposed to happen," he whispered. The deputies handcuffed him. Not violently, just with inevitability. He didn't resist. Evans turned to me. "He'll be questioned about the evidence tampering and the loan misrepresentation. This case is moving quickly now." I nodded numbly, but inside me a storm turned. Not satisfaction, not triumph, something cold. A kind of grief that felt like swallowing stones. Denise placed a hand on my back as the sheriff's car pulled away with Jared inside. "You did what you had to do," she whispered. "You protected them even if they won't see it yet." I wanted to believe her. But then my mother reappeared at the doorway, eyes red, cheeks streaked with tears. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Fear, blame, confusion, or something worse. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "This is your doing." The words sliced clean through me. Before I could respond, she turned away, following the ambulance into the rising morning light. Behind me, the house seemed smaller than ever. And ahead, court, truth, consequences. But also a question that began haunting me even as the deputies packed away their gear. If my family couldn't forgive me for saving them, who was I fighting for now? And the bigger cliffhanger, what would happen when the truth about Wilmington, the secret that could shatter everything, finally came out? I spent the next 2 days in a haze, moving through hours as if they were made of wet cement. My father remained in the hospital stable, but exhausted. My mother refused to speak to me, responding only with clipped messages relayed through nurses. And Jared? Jared sat in county holding while the district attorney reviewed the mountain of evidence now stacked against him. The town buzzed like the kicked beehive. People whispered in grocery aisles. Some avoided me entirely. Others approached with sympathetic eyes and cautious questions. But I didn't care about any of them. I cared about the one envelope Deputy Evans handed my attorney that morning, a copy of the Wilmington letter found in Dad's box. The handwriting belonged to a woman named Laura Greer, and the date on the postmark carved through me like ice. It was dated during the year my mother was undergoing radiation treatment, a year Dad had claimed he never left her side. My attorney, a practical woman who rarely softened her tone, looked at me gently. Ariana, this isn't necessary for your case. You don't have to read it. But I did. The letter was short. Harold, I've been patient, but I can't stay invisible anymore. You promised me you'd make a decision. If you won't, I will, Laura. My father's name written in another woman's script felt like a betrayal that weighed more than any ledger I'd ever kept. I folded the letter slowly, my hands numb. The open loop. How long had he kept this secret? And what else had my parents hidden under the guise of family loyalty? That evening, I left the hospital after checking on Dad. He was asleep, breathing heavily but evenly. My mother sat beside him, her face drawn, her gaze fixed on the floor. She didn't speak. Neither did I. On the drive home, Denise called. Ariana, something's happening downtown. Her voice trembled in a way I'd never heard. What is it? You need to get here, now. When I arrived near the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Reporters, neighbors, deputies, and in the center, Jared, not handcuffed, standing beside his lawyer. He'd posted bail. My stomach dropped. His eyes scanned the crowd until they locked on mine, sharp, bright, and burning with something between fear and vengeance. He stepped forward, raising his voice so it carried across the courtyard. This is all my sister's fault. Gasps fluttered through the crowd. She manipulated my parents. She forged documents. She's been trying to take control of the farm for years. The lies rolled smoothly off his tongue, practiced, weaponized. The mini-hook reporters turned to me with cameras raised. I held my ground. That's not true, I said, my voice steady. He burned evidence. He lied to my parents. And he used their home for a loan they never agreed to. Jared sneered. Prove it. I already have. His jaw ticked, his mask cracking just enough for me to see the fear underneath. But he wasn't done. He turned back to the crowd, voice trembling with false emotion. And she's going to tear this family apart even more once she tells everyone about our father's affair. The courtyard went silent. A flock of birds startled from the courthouse roof. Every face turned toward me. Heat surged through my body so fast it made me dizzy. He knew. He knew about the Wilmington letter, and he wasn't afraid to use it. My lungs tightened. You're dragging him into this now. You dragged me first, Jared snapped. Now the whole town knows what Dad really is. Congratulations, Ariana. You finally won. But I hadn't. Not yet. And certainly not like this. Deputies moved in, then escorting him and his lawyer back into the building for a hearing. But the damage had been done. By nightfall, the entire town would know about Laura Greer. My family's private shame, and I was the one who would be blamed for exposing it, even though I hadn't said a word. The cliffhanger came as I returned to my car, shaking. A woman stepped from behind a pillar. She had silver hair, kind eyes, and a soft Carolina accent. Ariana Blake. I nodded warily. I'm Laura, she said quietly. Laura Greer. My breath left me in a shudder. I think it's time we talked. Laura Greer wasn't what I expected. Not a homewrecker, not a villain, not the ghost in a hidden envelope. She was composed, elegant, and heartbreakingly human. We met at a quiet cafe off Lexington Road. She ordered tea. I ordered nothing. My stomach was too knotted to accept it. She folded her hands gently. I didn't come to make your life harder. I came because I heard your father was in the hospital, and because I never wanted this to hurt you. I stared at her. You had an affair with my father. Her eyes glistened. Yes, for 1 year. He ended it when your mother's health declined. He chose her. Chosen. That word hit like a blow. My father had chosen my mother, but he hadn't chosen to tell her the truth. Laura continued. I sent that letter because I needed closure. I wasn't planning to reveal anything publicly. Your brother, he contacted me last week. My chest seized. What? She nodded. He asked for details. Wanted to know how long it lasted. Wanted copies of messages. Her voice faltered. I refused. I told him it wasn't his business. But he was desperate, angry. He said he needed leverage. Leverage. A word that tasted like poison. My brother had been willing to weaponize my father's infidelity to save himself. Laura wiped her eyes. Ariana, you're not the villain, but your brother is spiraling. And if someone doesn't stop him, he's going to take everyone down with him, including himself. I exhaled shakily. I don't know how much more I can take. She reached across the table, her hand warm on mine. You are stronger than you think, but you can't save your family by carrying their sins for them. I didn't know if she was right, but I knew the truth now. Jared was drowning, and instead of swimming, he was grabbing anyone within reach and dragging them under. When I left the cafe, the sky was overcast, the air thick and storm-heavy. My phone buzzed with a message from the district attorney. Need you at the courthouse tomorrow. New evidence surfaced. Potential plea proposal. Hope flickered. But as I reached my apartment door, a chill swept over me. The door was cracked open. I froze. Denise's voice echoed in my mind. Predictable means vulnerable. I pushed the door slowly. My living room was trashed. Drawers pulled open. Papers scattered. A lamp broken. My spiral notebook lay in the center of the room, pages ripped out, stomped on. And on top of it, a note written in black marker. Stop, or you'll wish you had. My blood turned to ice. Footsteps approached behind me. I spun. Deputy Evans stood there, breathless, hand on his holster. I got a call from your neighbor. Someone broke in 10 minutes ago. My voice shook. He was here. Evans nodded grimly. And whoever he brought with him is getting bold. I felt the ground tilt. I can't keep doing this, I whispered. I'm losing my family. My father is in the hospital. My mother hates me. And now Jared wants to hurt me. Evan stepped closer, his voice firm. Ariana, listen to me. I looked up. You're the only one in your family doing the right thing. The truth is ugly, but justice doesn't care about comfort. It cares about facts. Tears pricked my eyes. He continued. Tomorrow's hearing could change everything, but you need to be ready. As he walked me inside, ensuring everything was safe, my breath steadied. Barely. I curled onto my couch, staring at the ripped pages of my notebook. If Jared wanted me silent, he had failed. All he had done was light the fuse. The night pressed heavy against the windows. Tomorrow would decide everything. The cliffhanger came when Evans paused at the door. Ariana, I shouldn't say this, but the DA got something big tonight. Something about an investor who flipped. My pulse kicked. Flipped? He nodded, testifying against Jared. I swallowed hard. Who? Evans hesitated. Someone who used to defend him. Then he left. I sat there in the quiet, heart racing, knowing exactly who he meant. My mother. The courthouse was packed. News vans lined the street. Reporters clustered near the steps. Townspeople filled the benches inside. It felt like walking into an auditorium where the play was my life and I was the unwilling star. Denise walked beside me. My attorney trailed behind a stack of folders in her arms. But when I entered the courtroom, one face stopped me cold. My mother, sitting on the witness bench, her hands folded in her lap, her shoulders trembling, her gaze lowered to the floor. When she finally lifted her eyes to mine, they weren't angry anymore. They were tired, heartbroken, and something else, determined. The judge called the session to order. Jared was brought in. And for the first time since this nightmare began, he looked small. Not the confident showman, not the manipulator, just a man trapped in consequences he had created. His lawyer whispered urgently to him, but Jared stared only at my mother. The district attorney stood. Mrs. Blake, please step forward. My mother rose slowly, walked to the stand, and raised her hand to swear in. Her voice trembled as she promised to tell the truth. Then the DA asked the question that would reshape everything. Did your son pressure you into signing loan documents you did not understand? Silence thickened in the air. My mother closed her eyes. When she opened them, tears slipped down her cheeks. Yes, she whispered. He told us it was just paperwork for insurance. He said he needed our signatures so his business could qualify for a grant. I believed him. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. The DA held up his hand for quiet. Did you understand that you were signing your home as collateral? No, she sobbed. I never would have agreed. I was sick. I wasn't thinking clearly, and he knew that. The strike landed clean. Undue influence. Exploitation. Fraud. Jared's lawyer slammed his pen onto the table. Jared shot up, yelling, "Mom, stop! You don't know what you're saying!" The deputies restrained him. The DA turned to the judge. Your Honor, in light of this new testimony and the evidence of document destruction, we request immediate full seizure of Mr. Blake's business assets, revocation of bail, and continuation of charges for fraud and tampering. The judge barely hesitated. Granted. The gavel dropped, and with it so did Jared. He slumped into his chair, hands in his hair, a strangled sob escaping him. He wasn't angry anymore. He was broken. My mother stepped down from the stand, shaking. I approached her slowly, unsure if she'd turn away. Instead, she whispered, Ariana, I'm sorry. Her voice cracked. We leaned on you because you were strong, and we leaned on Jared because we were afraid to see who he really was. I pulled her into my arms. She trembled against me. Then she said the words I had waited my whole life to hear. You were the one holding this family together, not him, you. The judge dismissed the court. Deputies escorted Jared away as he turned one last time, his eyes swollen, his voice a rasp. I never meant for it to go this far. I believed him. But intention doesn't erase destruction. The aftermath came quietly. Weeks later, Dad returned home. My mother began therapy. The farmhouse entered legal protection, ensuring it could not be touched without full family consent, mine included. My attorney closed the case with a statement that echoed across the community. Justice is not vengeance. It is restoration of truth. And as for me, I reclaimed my life. I moved to a new apartment, one with tall windows and afternoon light. I started hiking again. I cooked dinner for myself instead of eating on the run. I stopped apologizing for things I didn't break. My voice, so long buried under obligation, finally felt like mine. And now, telling this story to you, I offer the simplest truth I learned. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by integrity, by accountability, by the courage to say no when someone demands everything. If my story resonated with you, share your thoughts. And if you want more stories of survival, justice, and reclaiming your power, subscribe for the next one. Your support keeps these stories alive. And sometimes, stories are how we heal.